We're faced with a difficult challenge, and we know that the American people watching this over so many days now understand the basic challenge we face. It's a challenge of reducing deficit and debt and cutting spending, but also making sure that we have a bipartisan agreement to pay our bills and to meet our obligations. And I think if I had to boil it down to 4 words, it is this, in terms of what people in Pennsylvania have told me that we must do. It's very simple, but I think it encapsulates everything we've got to do in the next couple of hours, really the next couple of days, and that's compromise for our country. That's what people are looking for. People all across the country. I hear from families in Pennsylvania all the time. These are families that have led lives of struggle and sacrifice, families that have lived through so much already. Many remember and have lived through the Great Depression and World War II and wars after that, economic downturns, personal tragedies, job loss, all kinds of misery and all kinds of difficulty. But throughout our state, and I think throughout the country, people have figured out a way to work together, to compromise in their own lives, even when they don't want to make a compromise. And they figured out a way to work together, whether it's at a work site or at home. And I hear from people all the time these same messages. Let me just give you a sample of some of the feedback that I've gotten from Pennsylvanians just in the last couple of days. We purposefully chose 3 letters, or excerpts, I should say, from 3 letters, from 3 parts of our state: southwestern Pennsylvania, the middle of the state, and the eastern side of our state. Fayette County, way out in western Pennsylvania. Here's an excerpt from a letter I just received. Quote, "In order that we do not dip back into recession, it's imperative that responsible people start acting in a responsible manner. Get this issue resolved in a manner that is best for the American people and not what is best for, quote, political parties," unquote. That's one letter, or part of one letter from southwestern Pennsylvania. Then I moved to the middle of our state, literally called Center County. "Please stop the bickering and work together to get the job done," says part of the letter. "Do your jobs. Come to a compromise." That's what people in the middle of Pennsylvania wrote to me just recently. And then thirdly, an excerpt from a letter in the eastern part of our state, Bucks County, a suburban Philadelphia community. And I'll read 2 sentences from this letter. Quote, "We must immediately raise the debt ceiling so that we do not default on our debt payments that would negatively impact our nation. Next, we must tighten our belts and develop plans to reduce expenditures and raise revenue, which would pay off all debt, just like my family's household did," unquote. So there you have it. 3 parts of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, 3 different letters from 3 different constituents, all expressing some fundamental basic sentiments that they have, and I think some very fundamental messages. What are those? Well, maybe I can boil them down to 4. Number 1 is work together and compromise. That's in almost every letter we see. Work together and compromise. Number 2, they want us to cut spending. They know that in their own lives, they've had to cut spending. They've had to change their spending habits to deal with this economic trauma that they've been living through, even if they haven't lost a job, even if they haven't lost their house or their hopes or their dreams. So they've had to cut spending. Number 3, focus on jobs. One of the casualties of this week after week of focusing on this question of raising the debt ceiling meant that we weren't taking action to incentivize the creation of jobs by use of the tax code or other strategy. Fourthly, I think the message you're telling us, obviously, is reduce deficit and debt. And they know that we may not be able to put in place a plan right now to do that, but they expect us to put in place the foundation for that, or a strategy or a pathway to get to substantial deficit and debt reduction. So whether it's cutting spending or reducing deficit and debt, whether it's telling us to compromise and work together and to focus on jobs, I think the message that the people of Pennsylvania are giving me, and by extension, I think all of us, I think that message is very clear. That's why when I look at what's in front of us tonight, when we're debating, we're going to be debating the proposal set forth by the majority leader, some basic elements in here that aren't just sound policy, but they are in fact incorporating compromise already, significant compromise. For example, making sure that if one side says we have to have a dollar-for-dollar reduction in spending to meet the challenge of raising the debt ceiling, the majority leader's plan does that. One side says that we shouldn't have any revenue, we shouldn't have any additional revenue as part of this agreement. The majority leader said, okay, I'll accept that, I'll compromise. So there are two significant and substantial compromises that he's already made in this proposal, and he's open to more. As he has said all day long and for many days now, he's open to more compromise. The legislation cuts spending significantly, almost $2 trillion alone in spending reductions for so-called discretionary spending. Lots of savings in other ways throughout the legislation, creating a bipartisan committee that will recommend additional deficit reduction to be voted on by the end of this year. And then importantly, part of what the majority leader put forward today, or yesterday I guess, in his proposal was part of what Senator McConnell put forth, the Republican leader. So by my count, there are 3 or 4 major compromises already in what the majority leader put forth, and he's open to more compromise. So I think that's what the people of Pennsylvania expect me to do, and I think that's what the people of the United States expect all of us to do. And finally, one of the best parts of this proposal is that it gives us certainty. I hear from business people all the time, big firms, medium-sized firms, and small businesses. And they tell us over and over again that in addition to the pressures that they feel, the difficulty they have in keeping their employment levels up, the difficulty they have in making ends meet in the aftermath of a recession, they tell us over and over again, we are business leaders and we need certainty. Or I'm running a small business in Pennsylvania and I need certainty. I need to know what my tax rates will be. I need to know what the business climate will be like. Please give me certainty. One of the best features of what the majority leader put forth is that there is certainty. We're not going to have to debate this thing and fight about it every 6 months. It provides some certainty into calendar year 2013. That's why I think a 6-month extension makes no sense at all. But you don't have to take our word for it. The rating agencies have made it very clear that if you do a 6-month extension, you're taking a very dangerous step that could lead to a downgrade in our credit rating. So I think the Reid plan already has substantial compromise. And of course, we can compromise more. So I think it's very clear what the people of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania are telling me. In the midst of all of the suffering, in our case, 479,000 people still out of work. We have an unemployment rate of 7.6, which some states wish they had. But it doesn't really matter what a percentage is. When you have 479,000 people out of work, even though the number has been going down for the last year, people are hurting. They're still struggling. They're still worried. They're anxious. They're worried about their children's future. And the least that they, or what they asked of us in this debate, the least that we must do for them is to come together, work together, surrender some political points of view, surrender some personal disagreements we have, come together, reach a compromise. And I believe that what they're telling us over and over again is that we need a compromise for our country.